let's cut the chat and get up there and get her opened up. Alright, so layer one here is we're going to call it. We got the owner's manual. We got the funky packing paper, which hopefully has protected the finish. That right there is the color that I see in the store. Again, kind of, it's really not red as represented online or on the front of the box. But, some people will like it, some people will hate it, some people just won't care as long as the saw is functional. But it is worth noting, there it is as it appears in the box. So I guess, can we freehand any of this? Probably not. We're most likely going to need to get two hands to get this stuff out. So I guess what I will do, maybe we can do this one together. Looks like we've got the, I really want this cut on my lens, so just in case any of it's oily. But right here, I'm assuming that'll be our vertical table. It's actually bigger than I thought it was, so that's good. I already see a scuff, not the end of the world, but we're gonna go ahead and just get this down where you can maybe see another layer, and I'll show you what we've got. All right, so what are you looking at? You're looking at what I believe would be the little tray that goes between the legs, which are here. And if you're curious what they're leaning up against, it's a muffler box. So it's not a quiet muffler box either. That's a loud muffler box. And they are basically the same height. So that's literally going to be your work surface. Picture the saw going on top of that. I mean, we're going to be maybe underneath the shelf of the MasterTech type of a height. But the way these are set up, I've got one set sprawled out for you. You'll note there's like a what looks to be 3 hinges, and that's because those are 3 hinges. So yeah, not exactly the most like awe-inspiring thing for structural stability. I'm sure bolted up it'll be a little bit more reassuring, but probably not quite what we would want. Right here, to get all that paper off of that sucker, we had to take that threaded screw out, and then a whole bunch of stuff fell and rustled down into the case, but that's going to be our belt, so that'll be basically kind of like the pulley cover. I can already tell that looks like something that's going to rattle really, really bad and create acoustics because it's hollow, so that'll be fun. Coming over here, this was where all that was nestled. We basically have 2 wheels. Those are plastic. Again, not the most confidence-inspiring things, but probably functional. Probably some axles or brackets. Honestly, that was tucked in right there. It almost serves as a perfect handle to lift the styrofoam out. I don't know if that's what it's for or to actually go somewhere on the saw. So that remains to be seen. But with all of that out, this is what your view should look like, or hopefully look like if we have everything here. So obviously we got the motor, drive end, we got the pulley over here, got the gearbox there. I've had several of you tell me to instantaneously, as soon as this is assembled, take that cover off and change the oil. There's kind of the business part of the saw. It actually looks, it's not a terrible color, you know, I mean, but you know, it might not be the red that you're thinking of when you say red, right? So can we do anything with that? Yeah. There's a good look at it for you. So that comes right off. My apologies, I would have done that. I thought that was like tucked in under the styrofoam or something. Blade is installed. It kind of looks true. So we'll see how it goes from there. Power cord looks to be decent thickness. Yeah. So obviously pulling this out, you will want to use caution. Common sense tells me the motor is going to be heavy, probably heavier than this side, and there's also a blade. So, you know, I don't know if it's locked in place. I have no idea really how the function of that goes, but it's something we'll keep in mind. So worst comes to worst, if you want to, you could flip the box on its side, cut the tape on the bottom, assuming it's taped and not stapled, and then flip it back in this position, lift the box off. That might be an option if you're hurt or, you know, not the strongest in the world, but we'll see how it goes. Obviously, I need 2 hands to do this, so we'll check it out and update you as we continue the unboxing and assembly. Alright, so we're back and we've had a little bit of a detour. Change of locations, as you can see, and this is what will be kind of a not great stand. A little lower than I'd like, but I'm not sure it's going to be the most structurally sound thing, right? It'll suffice for a little while. Obviously, we can tweak it or adjust it at any time. Maybe we'll even grow to like this thing, but the color. The more I looked at it that night, the more I became less and less a fan of it. It's really not terrible, but it's not what I want. So what do? Well, I paint it. And this is the shelf. We put basically zero prep work into this, and I will be totally straight up honest with you. Here's the reason why. It's kind of like a textured powder coat. Ideally, I would just like Scotch-Brite it and, you know, go to town. Typically, I'd prime something like this to shoot the blue over it. But I honestly think here sooner rather than later, once we get a couple of imminent projects done, we'll probably make like a standalone stand that we design for this saw. So I'm not really concerned about this because this will basically then turn into like scrap metal that I can do something with, because I don't ever want to use it to hold something up. So I'm not super concerned with doing a great job. I just kind of want it to be blue. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to flip that. That's what I got done the other night. If you hear anything, it's like 70-mile-an-hour wind. It's supposed to get up to 80, so I can't really have this super well ventilated. But gonna throw a respirator on. I've got a nice piece of cardboard that's like gonna allow me to run these things out all the way, I think. And I'm just gonna lay down some coats, see if I can get this maybe dried up, put it together tonight. So with that said, there is your little color comparison. Again, you don't have to do this by any stretch of the imagination, but if you want to, you can. And what I'll do, that's the bottom side of the shelf because it was just a test. I could literally put this thing together and I don't think anyone would know that that was blue. But I kind of want to do that, and we might kind of run our fingernails across it and see if it scuffs off or if it's going to flake. And if it doesn't, we're just going to go to town like this, again, without prepping it, which is not something I would recommend unless you're going to ditch it later. So like I said, this really isn't terrible. It's just not what I want to look at. So we're going to make it blue, and I'm going to do that right now. All right, is that an upgrade or is it not an upgrade? You probably can't tell because my hand is covering the lens. So let's do the reveal. Boom. I tell you, from here it does not look that bad. Maybe this side looks a little worse than that one. But you gotta remember, we kind of put forth zero effort in prepping this stuff. Now, I was so disappointed with how it was looking, I came in and I actually sanded the belt cover, and that didn't seem to help much. Not like immaculately sanded, take it down to bare metal or anything. But I started, as I was unhappy with how this turned out, which, again, I mean, like, if I do this, like, that's not really that bad aside from needing to hit that section again. It's just, even with, like, knowing what I know and thinking what I think about, will probably ultimately not use this. We're going to use it for a little while, and I wanted to have it in a color I would at least enjoy. It really bothered me, and like I was painting this one, and then I was looking at that one, and as I studied it more, I was like, well, man, that looks terrible from the factory too. And it's not, you know, the paint coverage was great. I mean, there was no bare metal or anything aside from like contact points that I've seen. It just did not look good. It's almost like it wants to be a thick textured paint, but it isn't, type of a deal. And I don't know. If you see the store demo or you buy one of these, you can probably relate to it. But we just kind of slapped this together, and I do, like I said, like, I mean, looking from back here, it's not that bad, right? You get a little closer, and you can kind of, I guess it matches. Again, I wish I wouldn't have painted them at the same time. Like, I could show you, like, oh, you think that looks bad? Look at this. And it kind of just mirrors what I saw in the maroon and the blue. So if you really wanted to use this stand and you wanted it to be green or orange or yellow might actually kind of be cool. I would probably take it down. I mean, if you could blast it, I don't know if a lot of people would have a cabinet that big, but like if you could get it blasted, it might be worth going that route. Otherwise, just kind of do what you can, get it to where it's sort of, you know, going to take some tack, clean it off, prep it, actually put forth a little bit more effort than I did. I think you could get a decent result, but this is, again, like I said, I think it's going to be temporary. Even if it's not, I mean, it's something that's going to kind of get banged on, so it's not the end of the world. But maybe I'm too hard on it, I don't know. But typically, like, you spray bomb something, you're like, yeah, that looks really good. And this one, I'm like, man, like, am I too much of a critic or something? I don't know, but I do like this better than what it looked like before I spray bombed it, even with all of the shortcomings, so I guess that's a win. Now back here, I'm actually going to mask that off. That's why we haven't painted it yet. Same thing on the inside. I don't know if I'll mask and spray or if I'll just kind of leave it, but it's after 8. I've not eaten, and work is tomorrow, so I think I might hit this with another coat here and there, especially like maroon spots showing through the blue. And just come back, let it dry, and see how it goes. Air the shop out, get the fan back on. You know how it goes. So, but that's kind of the progress point there. And have we painted the saw yet? No. Mainly because this is like, I need a bigger shop. And this is kind of the space we've got. I can't go outside and paint. Well, you know, in 60-mile-an-hour wind. Sediment aside, you know, it's just one of those things. The paint would go not where I want it to, type of a deal. So this is sort of the painting area, and I cannot paint where the saw's at, and I can't get the saw over here with this stuff here, so it's a little slower and more cumbersome than I'd like it to be, but it should be worth it in the end. So I'll get some work done, and I'll catch back with you as we've got some updates to share. Alright, so it has been a couple days here, sadly. Didn't have free time. There's a text right on cue to interrupt us. But got the frame painted. It'll look a little bit better. Belt cover if we like to use that. And that brings us back to the saw. Why the odd angles? Well, there's no space in here, that's why. And this is the saw. I played around with it just a little bit, kind of checking things over. But what we need to do is, if we want to paint this, it's kind of going to be a pain in the butt to paint it right there. And I don't have a surface to put it on. And basically, I think we need to put the stand underneath this thing to elevate it to paint it. And ironically, that very stand may very well serve to make it a little bit easier for us to cut material to build a stand at some point in time. But for now, just kind of want to get this thing functional. That's why we purchased it. We have some stuff to cut that we want square, and we're going to hope that this thing cuts square. So let's go ahead and start the process trying to get the stand on the bandsaw. Alright, so counterweights. Anyone familiar with that word? Apparently the manufacturer of this saw aren't, because it is extremely biased in the weight concentration because of, you guessed it, the motor. Really kind of awkward to move around. Especially, this is one of the smaller dollies. If we had a bigger one, it probably wouldn't have been as big of a hassle. But got it up on a dolly. I've also shifted everything back into the side and totally blocked that end of the shop now. But we have access to the gantry crane, and that's what I wanted. So the other thing we've done, we have opened up the hardware. I always use these little Ernst trays. All we're concerned with is 1, 2, 3, and 4. Everything you see black there, plus some cotter pins. So basically brackets, I guess, for the axles. I haven't actually looked at anything. I just dumped it from the bag. That's the way we roll. Did include a hex key, and I think now what we're supposed to do is assemble the stand, which I have shifted over there. And I don't really like the instructional order on that, so we're probably going to modify it. And I guess we'll try to have the stand constructed as a one-piece unit before we lift the saw up, and then try to make the connections underneath. That's another thing I'm not really happy with. Essentially, I'll just run you through it. So if you see these stands, obviously, you know, we've painted the hinges, so they're kind of a little more reinforced, right? But if you note, there's like that tab right here, the oval slot. Got another one there, replicated on the other. That's basically where we make our connections to the actual saw. And I know what you're thinking. You're like, seems like there should be tabs where like the saw bolts down and the bolt would thread through the saw, through the stand, and have a nut come up from the bottom. Apparently not. Apparently there's just tabs on the sides, which is kind of crazy given how flimsy this seems. I know when you bolt it together it'll be somewhat better, but that's still pretty flimsy. And I mean, just look at the gauge of the steel there. And then coming over here, this is it's not the heaviest thing in the world, but compared to that stand, it's a bit disproportionate. So I'm guessing like right there, you can kind of see a hole. You got another one over there by that bracket, and that's essentially how the stand bolts up to this thing. So yeah, I don't know if we're gonna lift it or if it'll be like really awkward and we'll wind up having to tilt it. If we do tilt the saw back, you would want to keep the gearbox and the motor up, obviously. So we'll just kind of have to feel it out and kind of see how things pan out. But just a really awkward thing to have to assemble, but we're going to knock it out. We'll see how we do it, and if we do the stand first and then the stand doesn't want to line up, then we'll know that we should have not done the stand first like the instructions say, and we should have just bolted the stand to the saw, maybe elevated it, and then with the gantry, of course, and then gone to town. So anyway, let's see if we can make it happen. All right, so first things first, the instructions totally don't mention doing this, but we will. So this comes pre-assembled, your bracket right here with the axle shaft. Obviously these cotter pins are installed from the factory. What's not installed, and they don't mention, is the wheels. So obviously I've slid one on. We got the other one sitting right there. And to secure them, we're just going to take a cotter pin just like what we have on that side. We'll bend that, and we will replicate that for the other wheel, and we'll have our axle assembly complete. Alright, so this is one of those things, if we had like a cameraman, it would be way easier. But I don't, so we're rolling with what we can. This is the bottom side of the stand, and something that the instructions completely failed to mention is the stand supports, which you can see right there. They are shown on this side, but they don't talk about the other two, which a lot of people just assume are duplicate parts. From my synopsis, it's probably best if we put them on the handle side. This axle side will go underneath the motor, the heavy side, if you will. But essentially, the way they want this to go, we are going to have that right there, the corner support bracket, and we've got the fastener coming through the sheet metal stand, through the bracket, terminating here. Backside, we have a nut and a flat backing up against the stand support. On the front side, we're going to have a flat, a lock, and the bolt. As far as I know, I think it's going to be 10mm socket or wrench that you'll need. I'm not a metric person, so that's what we're just going to go by. I'll tell you what tools you need. But I'm going to go ahead and swing this thing up to the other side, have this one assembled, and then we're going to do the same thing with the corner brackets that they failed to talk about for this side that will have the handle. So initially I had this one shifted, same orientation here, just to keep them separate. So your handle will basically go here on this side, and then we're going to have the axle on the motor side. Alright, so just to walk you through this again, for the axle side we're going to have the bolt, the lock, the flat. It's then going to go right through the sheet metal stand. So for this oval slot, obviously when we swivel it up to that oval slot, we're going to have bolt, lock, flat, axle bracket, stand. Then this would interject here. You're going to have this corner bracket. On the back side of that, you will have a flat and a nut. Again, you'll need 10mm wrench or socket to make those connections. And obviously, if you look at this angle bracket for the corner, this side here, kind of, it's gusseted if you want to call it that. Think of that as the ground side. Is that correct or incorrect? I don't know. They failed to mention it. I'm just going to do that because it'll maximize contact with the ground. As you can see, it's tacked in 3 spots. Beautiful. So, anyway, we will also want to bolt that up over here. Otherwise, it's not near as structurally integral as it might be. So, in that case, I guess we'll probably just do bolt, flat, stand, this bracket, flat, nut. That's at least the way I'm going to set it up. So once I get all that done, I'll walk you back through it. But again, sometimes it helps if you sort of see the layout. So with that said, I'll get this thing cranked out and we'll showcase the end result. All right, so there is our motor side stand. Again, cotter pins to clip the wheels to the shaft, and then the axle bracket there at the bottom, black piece, obviously not the axle. That is going to have the bolt, the lock, the flat, the bracket, axle bracket, the stand, threads that go through the corner bracket that they don't mention in the instructions, and then you're going to have the flat and a nut. For the side, right there, the black bolt that you see, all I did is I ran a flat washer, and then we've got the stand, and then coming through the other side we would have the stand support, and then a flat, and then a nut. Again, little icon 10mm stubby, just kind of hiding out right there, and the Coke and Flex got the job done for us there. What we have over here, again, this with the axles will be our motor side stand. This one is going to be opposite of that, your light side, and it's going to get this little handle, and as best I know, it just slides through here. For a moment, I thought we had a crisis on our hands. There was a situation where I thought, man, I cannot believe that they're going to try to make these This whole thing will fit with screws, and there's a bag right there in front of the ratchet that I had left over there. It fell off the box, and that's the big hardware for these mounting poles. Like I said, I was very concerned about that. But essentially, we're going to use our cotter pins. We'll attach the handle. I'm pretty sure it goes like that. I didn't actually check. But it looked to me like in the instructions, in fact, let's just grab them here. Roll them down right here. And talking about the stand, which they would have had us do first, that is how the handle's oriented. But the stand, it looks to me like there is one hole, two hole, one hole, two hole, right? So there should be holes down here at the bottom if you put the axle on this side. And if you don't, you'll put your corner supports, which again, that's all the mention is there. And it's only on this side. I don't talk about anything over there. But up this, and it's not spelled out in the instructions at all, which is interesting. But right here, it looks to me like this shelf was going to go in a hole, you know, like right below the handle. And I'm like, there's not one. there's not one over here that would correspond to it. Well, apparently those slots are going to be inside of the frame. So if I flip this guy over, see on this upright here, you've got this oval slot running vertical and that one. That's where that little shelf, which I've got on top of a blue engine stand, which doesn't help you, but this guy, that's where it's going to go, and it will actually use the 4 screws. There are literal screws that take a number 2 Phillips in your hardware kit. That's what that is for. So personally, I think it would have probably been more robust if it came all the way out here. They would have had to kind of make it puzzle piece style, but I think that would have added significantly to the strength of the stand. But anyway, we'll assemble it and go to town. Also, I'm not 100% sure why they go ahead and stamp these equilaterally when they could have just stamped this side, nothing down there, and just here for the handle, nothing up here and just down there for the axle. But I guess it's probably part of the manufacturing process or something. It's just easier to do it all. So anyway, we will get cotter pins on the back of this, and then we're going to do the support stands, which again, you can see I've got 2 more left in that bottom corner, and we'll just run those bolt flat framework. On the inside, we'll have the corner support, a flat, and a nut. Again, 10mm wrench and socket's all you'll need to anchor it down. And that should keep it from hinging. If you recall, these are hinged, obviously, for flat pack shipping type purposes. But that'll add quite a bit of strength. And we'll also get a little bit more contact with the ground by way of that triangulated gusset. But anyway, we'll get that done, and then we'll put the shelf on. And this thing should be ready to try to join up to the much, much, much heavier, very lopsided 4x6 bandsaw. Alright, kind of a funky angle there, but the main thing, cotter pins are installed with the handle. Coming on down, this is a pretty good look at the way this is set up. Again, this side is the handle side opposite the motor, so we don't have the axle on the back. But this little corner support bracket, again, just one last time, coming in from this side to make it different. You're going to have, obviously, the threads, the nut, the flat, corner support, stamp steel, flip side on the outside. If we turn this over, you have what? You have a flat, and you have the bolt. So that is that. The stand, it's, I was gonna say like, oh, that's not bad, but then this is the hinge side. This is fixed. This is fine, but in order to ship easier, they have this side on a hinge, and as you can see, even though it's got corner support brackets, it's flexing a good bit. So will that help any? The shelf over there? I don't know, but we're about to find out, because that's all we have left to do. So that might be awkward. I might need to get some cardboard over here so we don't take more of the paint off. Again, had we have prepped this a little better, the paint might have adhered a little. But main thing is just, that's not terrible, but I want it to look like I want it to look, so we're gonna roll with it. But let's get the shelf in and have the stand finalized and see. I mean, like I said, that'll add a little bit of rigidity, but I mean, if we would have had a puzzle piece where they would have had like the stamped steel slotted and then just tucked down and bolt here, I think it would have added a lot, because this side structure, particularly this side with a hinge that wants to collapse on itself, would have been supported by the stand, which would then be bolted at 4 points. But it is what it is. Sorry about the weird angles there. We're in my lap here. So I'm going to set this down, get the stand on. Not sure I will be able to film that, but I will walk you through it, and then we'll have the finished stand, and we'll take a gander at what we've created. Are you ready for it? I don't know if you are. Well, you are now, because there she blows. And very unassuming. This is my kneecap, and that is the bandsaw stand. Again, I highly, highly recommend, as we said before we unbox this thing, if you're interested, regardless of the brand, if it's a 4x6 that looks similar to this, change the colors, downgrade, upgrade here and there. Get to a Harbor Freight that has a floor model, something it's usually kept under pallet rack at the stores I've been to, don't know why. But it fits there. It fits there very well because it's quite small. And I know what you're thinking, like, oh, that's going to stand up there and it'll be a nice height. It's okay. Again, I kind of covered the pros and cons of that earlier, but it's very unassuming. Like, if I scoot in here a little closer, I'm on a detail seat, like a little detail creeper seat, and I mean, we might have 2-3 inches here to the stand. So, real quickly, hard to do. You know what? Let's use that knee. And pray that the camera doesn't go anywhere. I actually have the Black Widow back. Why? Because we're on that side of the shop. It was the closest tape measure to me. 22.5. You know, I mean, this is very unscientific, awkward angle, camera balancing on a knee, but we're going to go with that, roughly 22 inches. Essentially what you need to know, it's not 2 feet, but it's over 20 inches for the stand, and the height of that bandsaw is not going to add much. Now, if you're ready for something crazier, okay, it would have been more cumbersome for me to grab the mini levels, which is what I planned to do. I was going to structure them across and then, up at the top, basically have like an armada of like 4. But it was easier again for me to access Old Faithful here from Empire. Your eyes do not deceive you. That is like, and I did not tweak this at all. This is just how I assembled it. I tried to line everything up in the center, not necessarily so it's level, just because I do my own work and I'm weird like that. Everything that I assemble, like, you can't really tell, especially since I use small flat washers, but it's centered as best as I could eyeball it. And this is no trick of the camera. That thing, it's not perfectly level, I mean, but it's functional. Like, we could put something here and it's not going to roll, type of a deal. Bird's eye view right there. Yeah, ridiculously close. I didn't have that much faith in this thing, but that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. So there, as we scoot back, you can see more of it. And I guess what we're going to do now is see, I've got some toe straps and stuff. Yeah, we might have to use both chain hoists, really. I mean, technically I could pick that up and set it there, but what I'm wanting to do is sort of lower it down. And again, that's the perks of the gantry crane. You could totally pick this thing up on your own. Again, lift from this side so you don't drop that on you, because if you lift from that side, it'll be super awkward. But cradle it as best you can, and then the issue is it's just going to be super awkward, because where you see these slots, that's where the mounting bolts go, okay? So there's not like some super beefy corner bracket that we bolt up here and then it accompanies something, it's like threaded as well, and you just have a bolt go down through the body of the saw. No. It's like, see that black tab right there? And then the hole beside it, that's like this mounting hole. It would technically be this one because that's the wheeled side, but you get the idea. It's a little concerning. Maybe it'll be better when we get it up and installed, and it'll surprise me like it being somewhat level. But right now I am just going to move on to that point and see if we can't get this to kind of nestle down somehow. If we have trouble with that, or if you don't have the gantry crane and you don't want to risk dropping it on you or crushing your stand or something crazy, I would advise that you find a friend, preferably one stronger than you. Then they can hold this and you can just try to line the bolts up. Although you would be subject to having it dropped on you. If you had 2 people on both ends, that would be super nice. But if you're working solo like me, the gantry cranes, I mean, heck, even an engine hoist, cherry picker, something to help you pick it up would be nice. I'm sure you could do it that way. It's just, you know how whenever there's things that flex, like this is going to give in and go a little bit here and there. If it's not just perfectly lined up, or you don't drop it down dead center, it's going to be a problem, and it's going to flex and wobble, and you'll be fighting it, and you might get this side tuck in and that side sticking out. And then if you abandon it, that side of the saw is sitting up, which means the motor goes down. It's just a bad deal. Also, whenever you're going to lift this by hand or by apparatus, make sure that it's in the locked position. That way you don't lift up there and, again, there's no counterweight there, so it's gonna go like that, and that's not good if you're trying to pick it up. So all that aside, I guess I'll wing it. If you are solo and you have nothing else, I think the best course of action would be maybe to have something kind of like this, or the box even, and just tilt her back and then lay that flat, get this side done, turn it, come to the back. I mean, keep in mind you'd have gear oil in the motor. The motor probably being the most expensive thing to replace. That will just make a mess. But as long as you don't crack anything, you should be okay. So it looks like the cover plate there is steel, not cast iron. So you would be less likely to crack it, although other things could go. But as long as it's not a mounting provision or the deck, we would be fine with that. But anyway, I'm going to see what we can do with the gantry crane, and I'll let you know. Alright, so here's what I've come up with. May have lifted this right prior to recording this. But basically, the setup I've got, I was going to use 2 chain hoists at the same time, and that would have allowed me to kind of grab where I was initially. And off to this side, the issue being, look at that gap between the 2 legs, if you will. There's way tons of real estate there. And there's not near as much outboard, right? And you've got to think like the motor is going to be on the back side, like outside the confines of the legs. So this side, I probably could have bolted up that side. We were lifted. I was trying to stay away from the pulley was my main thing, and I want it nestled sort of between the pulleys of the motor and the gearbox. That sits right over the mounting point. And then this side, I had it lifted great. It's just a situation where I wouldn't have been able to get the strap out, right? Like we would have had it halfway on the stand, had it tilted up, probably would have motor flown that way, stand flown that way. Bad situation. So basically it's kind of hard. Again, it's undersized dolly. All my big ones are occupied, but I just shimmied it. Basically when you tilt, the dolly wants to go with it, so you have to put your foot down, quite literally, put the balance down on the dolly, and then slide your straps under. I've kind of got them more centered, which is kind of scary because this is an uneven load. And I don't know, maybe the 2 hoists would be better now, but I thought, you know, hey, since this is such an awkward deal, let me just try to triangulate it. So that's what we're going to roll with. Going to lift it up. If it basically gets off the dolly, we kind of have a good feel for it. What I was doing to provide counterweight is just where that handle is on the saw, just putting slight downward pressure. I can sort of manipulate and balance it. But I think this will allow me to get all 6 of the mounting bolts in, or at least some of them started and then lower it and do the rest or something. But ideally we'd put them all on vertically, like maybe even just prop up the stand or something. But as we get to that, I'll let you know what we did, how it works, and we'll walk you through what tools you need. Alright, so this is actually working pretty well. Kind of you could get a feel for it as we came off of the dolly right at ground level. This is not up very high, but that's about where she needs to be really for that little stand. Again, a very short stand. But we'll probably raise it up a little bit. I'll probably shimmy that around, take some more of the blue paint off as we kind of kickstand it at an angle. That's the only thing. This is now, you know, the saw is not square, it's sort of like cantered down. So that of course means the legs will replicate that angle, but I think we'll be able to work with it. So it's just 6 bolts. We'll see if we can get a couple of them started, get this thing nestled in, and I'll try to showcase that process a little bit. Again, it's just sort of hard working solo. Alright, so still hanging out here. The difference is the stand is now secured with the 6 fasteners. Backside one, you've got that spring, kind of makes things interesting. It's, once again, there's just really not a good way to do this. It's even awkward with a gantry crane, be the same way with an overhead hoist. If you had the motor off, it might be a little bit more, you know, simple to kind of flip the stand on its side, and I would honestly do that. If I did not have the gantry crane, I think I would have just laid the saw flat, you know, on its back, and we would have just made these 2 connections here and here. And then I would have probably tried to make the side, and then I would have seen if I could cheese it into standing up, maybe shove a screwdriver through the holes to locate them, tap them out and hope the bolts go through. If not, flip it over on its front side, maybe put a rag under the gearbox in case the oil comes out or something, and call that good. But we are done. The hardware, for what it's worth, 8.8, so I mean, assuming that's honest, it's pretty solid. But what we had to use, obviously those are larger bolts. Can you see the icon? 14 millimeter. So a little 14 millimeter stubby. Again, the stubby's worked great. I wanted to bust out the ratcheting wrench and go to town with it. It's just with the pan, you know, sheet metal bend right there, the 90-degree lip, made it awkward, and the icons are just so long. A standard probably would have fit fine, but those long pattern ones not so much. So essentially what I need to do, we're still dangling off the ground here, so I'm going to need both hands. I'm going to lower it down and kind of try to hold it up at the same time so it'll land. But I did go ahead and fully tighten that stuff. I don't want to take any chances as I lower it. We'll check it again once we have it kind of square on stable ground, assuming it's square when it gets on the upright there. But this is also, hopefully you've been paying attention to contrast between the colors. Some people may love that. Again, it's just not for me. This looks way better. The Gantry Crane Gray would have been good. The US General Orange would have been good. I don't know. It's just one of those things. So with that said, this does solidify quite nicely. I mean, all the flimsiness is gone when you try to manipulate it. It's just a situation where I would like to see something a little bit more substantial, you know, like 1/8 inch minimum type of a thing, not just like stamped and folded sheet metal. Personal preference there. Okay, I thought that was connected. I was like, well, I hope there wasn't a front and a back on that shelf. But it's coming together, and that's the good news. So what we will do is just lower the thing down, square it up, see what she looks like, and pay attention though, if you do hoist it like I did, you almost have to come in right on that deck where you'd be cutting your material. This, while it'll clear fairly easily, it's just a situation where you have to factor in the leg. So while you could lift here and be fine, still thread your bolt in, you have to clear the legs to free your strap. So you have to basically come in almost to this anyway, so I just went all the way. Same thing over here. Be mindful of what you'll be clamping around. You don't want to like rip something off or crush something. But it's just a situation where the saw itself sort of dictates your lift points. It'd kind of be cool, like the Gantry crane, what I did for the I-beams and stuff. I drilled them, and we ran, you know, eye-bolts through so I could lift it. That would be great here. It's just, it's a cast iron body, and there's not really a great spot to do that due to the uneven load. But I'm tired of talking. I'm going to get this thing laying down, standing up, I should say, and we'll see what she looks like. All right, so here is the saw back on the ground. Again, no overhead chain hoist, no straps, nothing. Just 100% up on the stand. Not the most secure thing ever, but I mean, I guess it could be worse, and it is functional for whatever that may be worth. Now, just out of curiosity, I have not done this yet. This is kind of important. We'll hopefully nest that guy. Dadgum, look at that. That's just about what the stand was. I mean, not what I would call perfect, but I mean within range. So that is good news on that front. What I'm kind of wanting to do, look at that. I mean, just surprisingly square. So what I'm wanting to do is kind of go over these labels in the event that I do actually go ahead and paint this thing. So just caution to prevent injury or property damage, lock down arm before moving. Again, that's kind of self-explanatory. Coming in over here, we've got the specs, I guess, on the motor. So everything's covered on that front. Right here, we have got stuff you can't really read anyway. The information that's important there, the blade, 64-inch by 0.47 inch by 0.025 inch. So speeds are above that, 80, 120, and 200. So that is worthwhile. Probably something you'd want to like jot down, maybe inside the belt cover, or you know, better yet, inside there. Just in the event that that becomes unreadable or you can't keep tabs on it. Right here, we've got the blade feed direction. So the teeth, note, are pointed, obviously. If you can imagine the belt being connected, power being on, the saw is going to run like that. And that means your teeth are going to go and make the cut in that manner. Right there, to prevent serious injury, lock arm up before cutting vertically. And that's about it, really. I'm sure there's some stuff on the motor, maybe on the capacitors, or maybe not, since they actually put it over here. Let's check this out. No nameplate. There could be a nameplate, but it would be blocked by that plate itself, so yeah, I think that's gonna be it, really. I don't see anything down there just yet. Obviously, we'd want to do a good job taping off the miter gauge. And it looks decent. Coming down, it almost looks to me like the blade might be running out just a little bit that way. That could be corrected just if we slide the guide in. But yeah, that's as far back as I can go because I've run into the truck. So there she is, man, on the ground on her own power. And I guess now we just kind of need to go through the steps of setting it up, checking it, seeing if it cuts square, all that stuff. And we'll take it from there. So first couple of projects, we'll see how we like the stand. If we can tolerate it, I mean, we might wind up with it for quite a while because quite simply, I just don't have space in here. I can't tell. Box, stand, punching bag, box. Box, literally a box. Sawhorses, creepers, engine, stands, engine. Cherry pickers, hoods, seats, you know, exercise equipment we can't get to, all kinds of good stuff. So with that said, I'll play around with this thing a little bit and we'll be back and sort of update you on it.